Good day, fellow adventurers. Might I say you're all looking good today. It's been a while. Glad to have you back. Come in, have a seat, relax. Welcome to Dresden's Tale, episode 52. This is season 3, volume 3, chapter 49 in our grand tale. This is high military fantasy, the kind that needs heroes. Ours is Dresden Fane, a dwarf, a warlock, basher of skulls, and all-around fine fellow. He's a warrior of the Stone Clan and navigating his way across a battlefield of woe. I'm Lewis Nichols, your humble storyteller, writer, voice actor, etc., etc. I'm the guy who wrote this thing, a crazy project spanning 2 decades and a whole cartload of Word documents. Thanks to YouTube, I've got a reasonable way to pass it on to you. If you're just getting into the tale, that's okay. In this case, it's not a bad idea to start in the middle. In Season 1, Dresden and I were just getting our feet under us. He was a total noob, and so was I. I was still finding my voice, learning about pacing and presentation. You wouldn't believe how much energy it takes to record one of these episodes. Dresden is still learning how much energy it takes to be a warrior, but he's a lot closer to figuring it out. This year, his second season of adventure, he's going to war. Another damn good reason to start here. No love stories. Bullshit. Okay, maybe a little one. But this will be an action-packed season. In fact, I'm pretty sure you're going to get tired of me coming up with new and inventive ways to tell you our hero smacked somebody in the knee. Last season, we attended a lot of high holy day feasts. Dresden complained some and stuffed his face with plenty of sticky buns. This season, we'll have sieges and fantasy warfare at its finest. Strap on your armor, my friends, ready your shield, and prepare to engage the enemy. Here on Vool, it's Ebba's 21st day, 2052 years after the fall.
Tribulations 23. Life, war, death, and war are the only inevitables. We are Keld.
Dresden Fane's first inclination was to shield his eyes from the burning red sun. He'd have done so if he could have raised his arms. He was trapped in a metaphorical river of warriors pouring through a magical portal to save Fort Roth. Moving forward without touching the ground, he was pinned. An ape-like monkey had a hold of him, pressed forward against a tall human in front. The simian fighter reminded him of the master of his house, except for the look of worry on this ape's face. Master Nanok wouldn't have been worried. The gate defenses were impressive. He twisted his neck around to see the high towers backing the invisible passageway. Crossbows fired, arrows ripped, all against an enemy he hadn't even seen yet. Along his route of travel, walls meant to funnel invaders and create a killing zone kept he and his allies confined. For now. You're on your own from here. The monkey dropped the dwarf and began a magical ascent up and out of the crowd. Dresden found himself in the roughest part of the current, knocked around by taller warriors, pushed and hassled. Along one wall, someone had painted a sloppy but ominous message. Tribulations. Know that to come to this place, at this time, means death. Instead of death, Dresden found peace along the graffiti-marked edge. But he wasn't looking for peace. Evoking his own magic, he flashed from the pit to the top of the wall. One instant, he was in the crowd. The next, he was relatively alone on the 4-foot-wide rampart, watching the flow of humanity below him. That's a good way to get a bolt in the brain, a man in a short tower yelled down at him. Dresden just waved at the man. Not much of a fort, he grumbled. He could make out the edges of the small city from his vantage point. Fort Roth did not live up to the name. Defenses were sporadic at best. Then he heard the call. The sound came to him, metal on metal, the war. Down the street, not a stone's throw away, men on horses fought a line of warriors. His blood surged. Dresden ran for the conflict. Iterians, armored in a combination of bronze plate and steel mesh, clashed with the city defenders. Their shoulders were well protected. Most wore tall helms made to look like wolves and bears. Realizing he was coming at their flanks, Dresden joined the fray in an aggressive stance. A blow to a horse's hind quarter sent it into a panic, throwing the rider. As the Iterian rose, Dresden rounded on him, sizing him up. The hairy human looked frightened, a wide-eyed gaze that only emboldened the dwarf. Dresden managed to goad his opponent into a lunge. Easily avoided, he turned the man's momentum against him. In a fierce overhand swing, Dresden brought the ball and knob steel mace down hard. The shrill cry of pain thrilled him. He struck again as the man lay prone, cracking the back of his helmet. Feeling pressure, Dresden backed away. One of the dead man's fellows objected to his victory. Coming forward with a sword as long as Dresden was tall, he brought the blade up and around to build momentum. He was sure the vicious strike would be a death blow, but his shield deflected most of the weapon's momentum. Coming out of his defensive crouch, he found he'd been joined by a minotaur against the Iterian. Dresden used his size to disrupt the enemy's onslaught. A quick move between he and the minotaur worked, throwing his attack out of kilter. Dresden took the Iterian low, the woman high, bringing the big man down with a thud, his sword clattering on the bricks of the roadway. "Have you seen anybody else?" The Minotaur's voice was thick and raspy. The fight around them was done, but the sense of peril was not. Boys ran out from a nearby building and started looting the dead Iterians. The city's warriors formed up and ran down the street. "I hear horns this way, but maybe we should follow the guard." "Dresden!" He looked up at the Minotaur, a Gaelic with perfectly symmetrical curling horns. The light brown of her fur added nuance to the lines of her strong, beautiful face. "Liz!" "Have I seen anybody?" He let the words drift around in his head. A little embarrassed, he struck off in the direction the rest of the men had gone. "No, I lost track of everybody. We did our best to follow you, but I wasn't waiting for Donald and your Tagara friend. We'll do okay without them." "They have to be around here somewhere," Dresden told her, though he wondered why he was suddenly so concerned with keeping the group together. As they paused, Liz tried the weight of the sword she'd taken from the man they'd killed. "Those two might never get through the gate. I had to fight like the hells." "What about Ralph, Karen, and whatever his name was?" Dresden tried to remember. "They'll be fine too, but whatever you want to do." Dresden let out a solid grunt. He had no idea what the right answer was. "We'll work around the gate area and see if we can find them. If the Iterians get close, we'll be in the right place." She let him lead the way down a tight alley out into the bigger street. The architecture was almost all stone, but Dresden recognized much of the wood for shutters and doors as native to Tarikia. The city was densely packed. It felt like it should have a wall around it, and Dresden was just beginning to think he'd missed it. It was a little sad, he thought to himself, that he might have missed a whole ring wall. He heard the rush of wings and instinctively ducked. A red blur passed over his head. "Wyvern Riders," he announced. Liz patted the heavy blade in the palm of her hand. "Ours or theirs?" "I guess I don't know." Then two more flew over. "Ours, I hope." Dresden ducked again when the top of a nearby tower exploded into rubble. He warded off the rain of debris with his shield. "We need to find the fight," Liz urged him. Following the sound of battle, the two rushed forward. Coming out into the open, Dresden wasn't sure what strange landscape he was looking at, but it was clear hundreds of Iterian infantry were pushing out from a bridge as its defenders fell back. A low, defensive wall stood as the next barrier, but to the dwarf's eyes, it wasn't much more than a line of crossbows about to be overrun. He led the way forward, but was unsure what they were getting into. For a moment he considered falling back, but spotted a pair of warriors leading more into the fight. One was a minotaur dressed in black leathers. The other, human, was light-skinned and wielded a spear and shield. The forces were fated to collide. Itarians, led by a human in fur-draped steel armor, waving a fiery sword. Killed wyverns strafed their masses. The damage was gruesome, but enemy bowmen repulsed the aerial assault before they could come around for another run. 1,000 men were about to clash. Swordsmen, siege, warlocks, priests, and the beasts of battle. This is war. Dresden only wanted to join the collision of steel and flesh, to make the enemy feel his might. He leapt the wall between mounted crossbows and lost his balance. Careening out of control, held upright only by momentum provided by his churning legs, Dresden smashed into the legs of a reptilian biped. Getting to his feet, Dresden cleared his head with a shake, then squared off, taking an aggressive stance. He prepared to feint, but his opponent's head came apart when a crossbow ripped clear through it. Oh, but there was plenty of battle to be had. This was the war he had been promised. I'll tell you about LII to pass the time while you wait to die. He taunted his opponent, moving forward with no hesitation. Crashing his weapon into the wooden shield of the next attacker, he hit the man twice more, pushing him back, before coming around with a roundhouse swing to crack the knee of a heretic who hadn't considered him a threat. Dresden took the tip of a broadsword to the chest, but it only stung as his leather padding held up to the blow. Turning back to his foe, he told him, "LII was strong, agile, and beautiful. She was good for me. We faced Rib Gnasher together. Why would I be afraid of you after facing the son of a god?" "Give him hell, Dresden," LII yelled. The man she faced off with covered himself as she threw the greatsword at him. When he brought down his defense, she struck him in the face with a cloven fist. Dresden planted the ball of his mace in the man's ankle, then turned on an Itarian dwarf to his left. He rarely fought someone shorter than himself, but was certain he had an inch on the furry-faced Tarek. "A man taller than both of us combined gave me this shield." He bashed the dwarf in the nose, but did not have the effect he hoped for. The dwarf slashed at him with a long blade, expertly handled. Luckily for Dresden, he was not intent on one victim. He fought the crowd. He drove back a Campbell and outright killed 2 others before coming back to mine Dresden. In the meantime, he and LII had conspired to bring down another armored human. "Pull back," Dresden said. When she hesitated, "Trust me, pull back." He went into full defense, giving ground until the dwarf seemed like he might give up the chase. With a strong step forward, he made a determined but measured attack. Despite the strong contact against the dwarf's ribs, the attempt had no noticeable effect. The enemy slashed at LII, opening up a bleeding wound across her hip. Nearly in the same motion, Dresden barely blocked a thrust to his face. It was enough that the impact still bloodied his nose. A crossbow bolt whizzed by the trio. His plan hadn't saved them yet, but it had accomplished his goal. The crossbowmen could not help but notice a strong target just 20 feet in front of them. Well clear of all but he and LII, the dwarf was far too tempting of a target. Dresden threw up his shield and orbited in a mad attempt to open a gap and perhaps even cut off escape. He could only hope LII understood what was happening. A bolt creased the dwarf's helm and another dented his shin guard. Dresden danced back, tripping hard and falling on his ass. LII would have never fallen for this, he smiled up from the ground. He was certain he was dead, but the dwarf had been tricked. Suddenly, the little warrior was in the air. LII had kicked him so hard she'd sent him flying. Even as he hit the ground, he was coming back up in a rage, but it was too late. The dwarf took a bolt to the shoulder. This time it sank deep. Scooting back, Dresden grabbed at LII and let the crossbowman finish the Itarian hero. Lived through the first day. Good start. Dresden laid back on the hard ground, the rest of the battle raging less than 100 feet away. LII smiled, despite her wounds. First hour of the first day. Let's find some healing and get back to it. Give 'em hell, Dresden. Give 'em hell, LII. The war is on, my friends. Hey, here's an idea. She said the first hour of the first day. Last season, we did about a show a day. Let's do a show for every hour. 24 episodes. What would we call it? Well, never mind. It's probably not a very good idea anyway. We've got fire wyverns. Hero on hero violence. I'm excited. Are you excited? All right, time to start the betting pools down in the comments. What are your predictions? Who's coming back into the story first? Will anyone? Are we going to meet anyone new? How long until I get antsy and kill Liz? That's right. Don't you go getting attached. Fate is a fickle, something. Fickle, I don't know, whatever. Now, anything we need to talk about? Dresden will let you in on the particulars of Vool astronomy soon enough. Oh, hey, did you guys know the fire wyverns produce their flame through an alchemical reaction in the gullet? In fact, that's the defining factor of being a wyvern. Not the breath, but the biotechnical integration of alchemical processes. So, yeah, science. And just like that, we're here. You should know what to do by now. Chant with me. Like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. Visit my fiction on Amazon for Kindle. And while you're at it, have a great day. We'll see you next time.